Welcome to Superpowered Rigging, Tips to Improve Cutout Animation Efficiency. We're here with Matt Watts. Matt, I have the luxury of getting to work with on a more regular basis. He's a Toon Boom instructor for some of our online trainings. He helps teach cutout and rigging. And because Matt likes to wear a million hats, he also is working at Optimized Play as a technical director with the team on this series called Odd Ones Out, and it's a channel of shorts. And in the past, he's also worked for Mercury Filmworks on Tangled and Netflix Kid Cosmic, and he is also teaching at Utah Valley University. He's teaching animation and rigging classes in his extra time. With that, I'm going to hand off to Matt. We have a pretty busy hour and a half. So Matt, I leave it to you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I really appreciate that. And thank you everybody for being here. It's so nice to have you here. I wish we could spend more time and say hello to each one of you. But I want to go over real quick what I'm hoping to cover during this session. So here's my outline. I just want to go over a whole bunch of rigging tips and tricks that I've come across over the years and that have helped me to work more efficiently. I'm always looking for ways to improve and streamline my workflow. And I would love to hear things from you guys later on too, if we can connect somehow, because I'm sure you've got some tricks that I would love to know. But I'm hoping to start off with some of the more unique stuff that I think I found over the years, and I hope that it will be a benefit to you. So let's get going. If I cover something too quick, I think I actually probably will. Just plan on that. Like, get your seatbelt on. This is going to be a roller coaster. We're going to be going really fast because I have a whole bunch of stuff that I want to cover. But please do feel welcome to ask questions, and Stephanie will try to get those along to me at a good time. Right now, the plan for the session here is we're going to do a presentation for about an hour of showing all these tips and tricks. And then after that hour, for 15 or 30 minutes, we can do some question and answer, a little bit more dedicated to the question and answer portion. So let's jump into this. I'm going to be showing rigs from some of the Toon Boom online training courses. I'm going to be showing some of my own rigs. And at the end, you'll also see links for where you can download one of my free rigs. It's a 360 rig. All right, so I'm just going to jump into this. I am using Harmony 21. And this just got released last month. It's so nice that we get a new version of Harmony every year with improvements to help us make our lives a little easier. All right, so the first thing that I want to show you that I think is kind of cool. So we've got this punk, and I'm going to copy the forward-facing pose. And if you've not seen these little markers before on the timeline, these are called frame markers. You can right-click and choose Mark Frame. And then you can choose like red, orange, yellow, green. Usually what I'll do is I set up my rig so that the front facing view is first, and then I go quarter and then the profile. And I just go down the line. I just start with red and then orange, yellow, green. And then this is really handy for helping me keep track of where those main poses are. And I'll show you more about that later. All right, so I'm gonna copy the first keyframe and paste it here. So this is, it looks a little weird. I have my reference image sitting in front. I want to go ahead and copy the front-facing pose of punk here. So this is a rig that I had the privilege of building for our online training courses. And I want to show you something that I call tweening forward and tweening backwards. You're probably already familiar with the tweening forward concept, but I want to show you the tweening backwards stuff. All right, so sometimes I'm going to need to make the envelope deformers tween from the front view to the quarter front view. So that's pretty straightforward if you're used to using envelope deformers. So I'm going to show the deformers here, and I am going to match them up so that it would match with this position for the jaw. And I'll go ahead and increase the bitmap quality, Control Q or Command Q on a Mac, so I can see that a little bit better. So I will make these deformers fit this design as close as they can. Now I can see that that quarter front view needs this little chunk missing from the jaw. There's a lot of ways that we could accomplish that, but I want to show you how I would like to do that. Okay, so right now, if I were to turn off my reference, you would see that I have those two poses. I'm going forward and backward a frame. If I were to spread these apart and tween or set motion keyframe, Control K, you'll see that it's going to tween from that pose to the next. Okay. All right, I'm going to press undo and bring those poses so that they're right next to each other. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to click on this drawing layer. I'm going to center on selection here in my node view. This is the jaw. And I'm going to tell it that I want an empty drawing layer, or an empty drawing swap. So I'll create an empty drawing swap. I'll center on selection so that you can actually see what this looks like here. Show my thumbnails. Okay, so I've got the front face, and then this is going to be the quarter front face. Something that I like to do when I'm working a lot in the node views, I like to open two node views so that I can quickly access the reference to turn it off and on. And you may have noticed this behavior. Sometimes you'll turn the bitmap quality up and then Harmony kind of forgets that that's what you wanted it to be. But you just Control Q, adjust the bitmap quality, drag it down, bring it back up. Okay, so what I want to do now is I already had the front one tweening to get to that next spot. So now I have a brand new empty drawing. I'm going to use my pencil tool, and I am going to use D dropper to get my swatches that I need. And I'm going to draw it here. Forgive me, I'm a little shaky. I could do the, I'm pressing Control and Alt. I'm on a PC to rotate my screen. All right, this won't take long. Okay, Shift X, Shift M, reset the view, get back out to here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my select tool, and I'm going to select all of these lines, and I'm going to join them together, this merge pencil lines button. All right. Okay, so now I have this version of the jaw that has that little notch in it. So I'm going to use the stroke tool and the light bulb and draw on top so I can quickly see all of what I'm working on. Let me delete all of those just using the contour editor. Here's a nice little trick. You can just wiggle the line and it will get rid of extra points that you don't need. So when you do that trick, just click between the Bezier points to get it simplified. Okay, I'm going to use my stroke tool, Alt V. I'm going to press K to show my strokes. And then I am going to draw to finish off these shapes. I'm going to go Alt Y. I like to use my Paint Unpainted paint bucket tool. And then I will select that and put it on the color art layer. Okay, so now I've got that new swap, but ideally I would like for that swap to be able to tween towards the front. Like if I ever need to tween from this view to the front, how can I make that deformer set get to there? Let me show you how I like to do that. First of all, I'm going to rename this jaw. I'm going to press Control D and I'll type in quarter front. Okay, so I've got my swap named first, and it's really important to name it the way that you want it to be named before you do this next part with the deformers. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the jaw drawing layer. I'm going to click on the rigging tool, click on this little plus to create a new deformation chain. And now I'm going to make sure that I'm in the envelope mode, and I'm going to use as few points as I can to still achieve what I need. So maybe I will go ahead and put another point down here. It's just the more points you put in, the more that the animators have to keep up with. So if you can get away with fewer, it's usually a little easier for people. So maybe I'll do that. I know that it's not following everything as perfectly as you might want it to. And then I'm going to close that envelope by holding Alt or Option. Okay, now I can adjust this. I probably shouldn't spend a ton of time on this so that we can cover everything that we want to get to. Okay.
While you're working on this, Matt, I know that we've got a few questions too. Is that if anybody is wondering about rigging or some basics to rigging, please don't hesitate to check out learn.toonboom.com. On the Learn portal, there are a bunch of free resources there, and you can check out at your leisure different types of paths. So please don't hesitate to continue to ask questions in the question. But as Matt's going, Matt is showing very precise things. So for sure, if you have other questions like, whoa, wait a minute, where do I start with rigging? How do I open a rig? How do I do some of these things? Please don't hesitate to check out the Learn portal as well. It's a free resource and can walk you through those things. So sorry about that. Continue, Matt.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, a lot of what I'm going to show here are more advanced techniques. They're not all the beginner stuff, so thank you for bringing that up. Okay, so when I'm working in the timeline, I like to be able to press 0 to collapse my rig really fast. And that way I can copy. So I'm going to copy my keyframes that were showing the front view of the face, okay? So here I am, and I want to now take this jaw and I want to tween it back to here. So I'm going to go to the jaw and I'm going to copy the quarter view and paste it here. So you can see that I've got the quarter view stuff. So what I want to do is I want to now adjust the deformer points. Oh, yeah, I'm going to make a mistake on purpose right now for you. Okay, so I want to now bring these deformers back, and then I'll explain what's happening, because for the longest time, I wished I could find a way to make deformer chains tween back and forth between each other. I just couldn't get it figured out until I realized you just need to make two separate chains and make them do what you want them to do. Okay, so now let's see what happens, all right? I'm gonna press 0, and I'm gonna spread these keyframes apart. And then I am going to go back to the quarter view. And here's the mistake that I mentioned. I'm going to disable my reference. Now this is the quarter view, and the keyframes are all back here. All of the deformer points are here. I forgot to set keyframes before I deformed it all. So what I need to do is I need to find this deformer chain. I'll just click on one of the points. I'll come into the node view and press center on selection. And I want to explain what's happening here. And I bet it sounds confusing. I apologize, but I'll do my best. So here is the front view face. All right, that's the cell swap that is called FR. And then here on this one, I have my quarter front swap, which is all of those deformer points are sitting in here in this little group. So all of these little points now, they have keyframes on them because I moved them around to match this view. So what I need to do is I need to come here, click on the jaw, and insert keyframes. So that's usually F6. And then I am going to insert keyframes on the other pose. Now what I will do is I will reset all of the keyframes, which is this button up here, reset current keyframe. So now, as I click on the jaw, I'm going to insert the keyframe, tween, Control K. Now that quarter front jaw will tween with the front, or vice versa. If I press 0 and I spread this out, this was the front one, the front will tween with the quarter. And then I could change that swap at any time, and it will kind of just work. So sorry, I think that came across really, really technical, but the secret is that this chain has all of the correct keyframes on it, telling it how to get back to that front view of the jaw from being a quarter view. So, man, I kind of want to keep moving, but maybe we can come back and talk about this one a little bit later. This is how I would now take what I've done so that it can be used. All right, so I'm at the top of this deformer chain, okay? When I collapse it here in the timeline, it has all of these little curve points. That's all of these little points here underneath it. And so I am going to copy that, and then I'm going to paste that back here. and it didn't look like it did anything, but what it did is it saved how are those keyframes supposed to behave when it's the quarter front coming to the front. So I have all those keyframes there, and then here I will reset them all to the restart point. So now if I were to ever collapse the rig and spread those apart, they will tween forward and backward. So
So
if
Matt,
there's any
you're
questions,
already wowing. You're already wowing people. Okay, so
oh,
with
thanks.
everything that you've already done, people are like, "Holy moly!" Like, how long has Matt been doing this? And like, how long would it take me to get this comfortable with the software? Okay, so before we go any further,
Yeah,
because this for sure is advanced, um, rigging and things like this. So Matt, can you tell us just a little bit about your background and how you got here today? I think that's really pertinent because people are watching and going, and anyone who's interested in learning more about Matt has a website as well. So please check out Matt's website because he's a teacher, because he has all this industry experience. He's got a ton, and just because he's a nice guy, I mean, he puts out all these great resources that are free for people to check out and learn and use. So Tag Matt, tell us a little bit about how you got into this maybe and how long it took you to get more comfortable to be able to do this type of seminar.
thank you. I appreciate that question. I've been in seminars and sometimes people, they talk a lot about themselves and I'm like, I kind of want to see the content that you're going to show me. So thanks. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Um, yeah, I started using Toon Boom Studio back in 2006. There were no deformers in that. There's no node view. And I was just learning it on my own, living in Utah. I couldn't find another soul in this state that was using the software. And so I just had to read all of the Harmony documentation. Well, it's Toon Boom Studio back at that time. And I was watching YouTube videos. There were very few back then and that were available. So I kind of learned as much as I could on my own. And then I was super blessed to get a job up in Canada for Mercury Filmworks. And then all of the cracks got filled in for me. All of the things I've been wondering. I'm like, I can see what they're doing, but I don't know how to get to that point. And so I was really thankful for that experience to where I was able to get to learn more. So you ask, how long have you been doing this? It's been like, 13 years or more, and it's a lot of fun. And I would say if you're watching cartoons and you have that passion inside of you and you just have to do it, you can't sleep at night without putting some effort towards making some stuff come to life, then go for it and know that yes, there's some technical stuff. I apologize. I didn't mean to scare you with what I just showed you. I was trying to appeal to the more technical audience that might be like, oh, I don't know if Matt's going to show me anything new. I thought that could be like a little tension getter.
No, no, no. So at the same time, Matt, there are other people who are like, wow, this is all making total sense. Thanks,
Good.
Matt. Okay, there
That
is a
helps me.
nice mix of people. So again, I think we're trying to address the broad audience that's on today. We want to try and get to as many questions. So Matt, I'm sorry I interrupted you. Matt has prepared like an immense amount of information for us today. Okay, so he always blows our mind. So you go, Matt.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I really appreciate the questions, and I look forward to answering some more. Okay, normally I would talk, I'm going to talk about it. This is a big thing that I've seen in studios before where it can get challenging. Okay, so I've got this jaw, and it's got swaps associated with it. And if I click on it, let's see, and I swap, I'm using my bracket keys, you'll see that there's a different deformation chain depending on what swap that I'm showing. So that's really great. But what happens if I decide quarter front? That's too long. I want to name it something else. If I come down here and I press Control D, and let's say that I name it Q_F. Watch what happens. Oh no, there's no deformers. What? It broke. No, it didn't. Let me show you what happened, okay? I'm going to come here into the deformation chains. Here are the different ones. I'm going to click on this transformation switch. So remember that new chain that I made is that fourth one. And it is looking for a drawing that is named quarter front. But I just did the unthinkable. I said it couldn't be friends with quarter front anymore. Quarter front is gone. So what I can do is I can click on the drawing swap in the camera view, and I can choose to tell it, hey, I want you to be buddies with transformation 4. Now look at this. It put that new drawing name here, separated by a semicolon from quarter front. So now it knows, okay, we're associated, we're friends now. I know to be with the QF drawing. And now I could delete that quarter front one because it's not around anymore. So that's called associating deformation chains. And if you want, I have a video that I made on YouTube if you want to see that in a little bit more detail. But I've seen that as a little challenge sometimes when it seems like Harmony forgets what you're trying to use. Okay, let's do a little quirk that I have found. All right, I'm gonna go to the arm. All right, so sometimes we will use what we call these multi-port outs. So right now, let's see, here's the arm. So if I turn that off, and then I've got this auto patch of the sleeve coming out. Oh, and what I do with that is I'm cutting some stuff on the torso. So sometimes you need to bring out more than one cable. But something that I would caution you against is we can also do multi-port ins, and I want to show you an issue that happens. So let's say that I've got some like separate shoes, or I want like the waist to be cutting something inside of the leg. I might take a cable and put it into the top here, and that can create an issue. Let me show you what it is. So here I've got the legs. You can see that I can move them around. I've got this parent peg. I could squash and stretch and skew them and stuff. But if I come to the timeline, I'm going to press center on selection. You would think that I could click on this little arrow and I would see the legs below it. Nope. And the reason for that is because there's this multi-port in thing going on where I have a different part of the rig coming in. Now, if I were to go ahead and unplug these, and in Harmony 20, we got the cable cutters. I love these things. They're so nice. You just click on them. Let me out. Okay, let me exit that group. And I'm just going to fix this little issue, and then we'll be all good. Okay, cable cutters, I've got a shortcut for that. Control-Shift-C, I set that. All right, so now if I click on that, the legs peg, and I display what is underneath them, you'll see all that hierarchy that you would expect to see. So basically what I tell people is, watch out. If you're trying to use a multi-port in, you have to be very careful about it and double check yourself in the timeline to make sure that you are making it so the animators can still use it. Okay, let's talk about some drawing tools. Okay, we're going way too fast. Okay, so these are some things that I think will be helpful no matter what workflow you're using here in Harmony. Now, what I'm doing is I've added a display, and I'm gonna hold Alt and let it connect under here. This is my tools test layer. I just want to see one thing at a time. I have a whole bunch of rigs in this file and I don't want my timeline to be that huge. Okay, so one thing at a time. Let's wiggle the contour. So like I showed you before, if you find a place that has too many contour points and you use your contour editor, the white arrow, you just wiggle it, it got rid of that extra little point that I don't really need. So that's a really nice way to take care of if you're drawing and you have a shaky hand, you can adjust the smoothness and the contour adjustments there in the tool properties, but that's a helpful thing to do. All right, now sometimes we'll make strokes. Okay, I'm pressing K so I can see my strokes. And now I'll use my brush. Check this out, I love this feature. If you use your brush tool or your pencil and you press O like octopus and you hold it, you can drag on your screen and make your brush size bigger on the fly without having to come over to any menus. Really, really handy. Okay, so now if I use my select tool, look at all of these strokes sitting on top of each other. Now, you're probably familiar with this button, which is flatten. So if you click that, it gets rid of the things that used to be separate strokes. But it still has those weird invisible strokes that are in there, and they're not doing anything. There is this little option up here under Optimize, and you can say Remove Extra Strokes. But that's two different buttons in two different places, and I have a magic trick to give to you today. Let me show you something that I gained one Friday night. I went in and I read through every single keyboard shortcut that there was. I'm a little nerdy, but hey, I'm trying to optimize my workflow, and I stumbled across this. Flatten and remove extra strokes. So this does not have a button or a keyboard thing in any one of the menus yet. Hopefully we'll get it added in a future edition of Harmony. But it does have a shortcut, Control-Shift-F, so you can just press Control-Shift-F and it does both of those things at once for you. It flattens and gets rid of the extra strokes. So very, very cool, highly recommend it. Let's talk about the cutter tool. All right, so here's my cutter, and right now it's set to tip style bevel. If you use this, this is called gesture cutter mode. If you don't know how to get it working, you just click on that multiple lines cutting gesture. That's in Harmony 21, or it's just called gesture cutter mode in, prior to this. Now it leaves that weird little notch. How can we take care of that? We don't want that. If we use the select tool and select both of them, you can do the little piece of tape and the two lines, merge pencil lines, and it will put them together. Or if you use the pencil editor tool, this one, you can select and then drag from the end of the blue straight line to kind of make that happen yourself, and they're still separate. Or I'm going to show you one more option. If you use your cutter tool and you set the tip style to round, then as you do that, you'll get like that little nub instead of the notch. So a few different ways you can take care of that. All right, here's something that people ask me a lot. Let's say that I was doing this arm and I wanted to move this line. I would try moving it and, man, I don't want it to mess up my perfect circle. So how do you do that? This is how I do it. I will select this circle, use the contour, and I just cut it, Control X. I'll use the contour editor, move this out, and then get to my select tool and paste this back. And now I can move it independently of that. Now, how can you get this to be perfectly on the edge of that circle? Here's how I like to do it. Use the magnet tool, the snapping. I set a shortcut M for magnet. All right, so now I can perfectly get it to align with that corner. And here's what I often do. I'll pull it out past, hold Control to add an extra control point, and then make it so that it snaps to there. The benefit of doing this is now I can get perfect lines for when I need to like copy the forearm to its own layer. And then when I use the cutter tool, I can trim them perfectly like that, or I can trim it on this side perfectly like that. So hooray for that little snapping magnet. Okay.
Is it possible to keep a pointed bevel when using the cutter? That is the question.
Not automatically that I've seen. Let's just go back and I'll do that. So you've got these three options, tip style, bevel, or round. And so you're either going to get the nub or you're going to get the notch. But just set a shortcut key for yourself. I do Alt J for join instead of close desk. And that is another thing that I'm going to share at the end is I have a bunch of free resources of the shortcuts that I use because I don't use all the standards anymore. I did learn the standard shortcuts and I found a lot of tools that I had not been using. So I'd highly recommend starting by using the default shortcuts. But then as you get used to using the program, you're using it for your own workflow, customize it to how you will be able to work most efficiently. Okay, so here's a trick that my friend Nathan showed with me. If we want to get a perfect rotation point in the middle of a joint, here's how to do it. So make yourself a perfect circle and then press copy paste, and then it always does this little offset. So if you press shift up left, it puts it back to where exactly you would want it to be. And then if you hold shift and alt or shift and option, you can scale it down to the center. And then what I usually do is I will take the width of that down, and then that way, when I make my pegs, then it's a lot easier for me. Control P, Alt 3, I can know exactly where to put that pivot point because of that tiny circle. All right, Oh, yes, this I run into all the time. What if you're drawing a hand and you can't use that little join command, okay? I press Alt J, but it's not working because it's only one line. Like, how are you supposed to join that? Here's the trick. Use your cutter tool, cut yourself just the tiniest little gap somewhere else. So now these are two separate things that are independent. And now you can use that little merge line. And so now they come together. And now I see this little pinch. I want to get rid of that. I'll use the pencil editor tool. I set it as Alt W, I think of width. And then you can select these things that are causing the pinch to happen and delete them. Okay, how do we avoid the line recalculating too much? Sometimes we want to join two things together, so I'm going to use that merge pencil lines. Notice how the line adjusted itself a little bit. I'm going to press undo and redo. Now, that's not a whole lot, but sometimes on other examples, you would see a lot more recalculation. Here's how I would recommend that you avoid that. Use your contour editor, add a few extra points on both sides of the things that are about to get joined, and then select them, merge them together, and now you don't get as much recalculation. So, little thing. If you have another question I could go for, that'd be fun.
Oh, so is it possible to add textures that the animators can animate in your rigs?
Yeah, definitely. I will go to that now. All right, I'm gonna go to my little potato rig. Now I built this. This is the free 360 rig I have available on my Gumroad account. So let me show you. All right, so here's my little potato dude. I used to work for Digital Gravy Animation and they designed this and it was really cute and we had a lot of fun with it at a recent comic convention. All right, so you asked about textures. What I've done here is I have these little PNG textures. So I went into Photoshop and I painted some blush for this little potato for the cheeks. And you click on them. Once you've imported the image, it's kind of hard to see. If you click on this B-box selection style, it'll get rid of that highlight so you can see it a little bit better. And this can be helpful. One thing, if you ever work on a really texture heavy show, you may want to be able to lock all the textures or unlock all the textures really fast, or you may want them all to be like hidden for a little while so that Harmony can run a little bit faster. Let me show you a really cool script that we have that we can use here in Harmony. It comes default here in your node view toolbar. It's called Select All Nodes. If you click on it and you were to type something like texture or cheek, I know that cheek is the word, oh, it's blush, sorry, my bad. If I type in blush, it will select both of those for me, and then I could lock them, or I could press D and hide them, or I could press A to enable them. But that's a really, really handy thing to be able to do. I didn't realize that that's what that button did, select all nodes. It selects them and keeps them selected so you can do what you want to with them. I'd be curious to know if that answered their question, but there's probably a lot of chat to get through there. Okay. I want to talk about master controllers. A lot of people have asked me about those and issues that they have with them while they're just getting started. So people will go ahead and make their 3 views, and then they'll make master controllers. Let me show you. I'm going to make a master controller just really fast. All right, so in order to make a master controller, first of all, you have to select at least something, okay? I'm just going to select one thing. And I'm going to go up to my master controllers, and this is going to be the slider wizard. Okay, so I want to go from frame 50 to 52. And then let's go ahead and interpolate between poses. I don't like doing that, but a lot of people accidentally do it. I want to show you what happens. And then you always want to name it with a good prefix, potato, and then I'll just call this test turn. And then I need to go into my node view. I'm going to press Alt, and I'm going to select all of my stuff that I'm going to include in my master controllers. I'm going to add selected nodes, and now it's going to push the node count up for me, and then I go create. And then I have my potato. I need to go find my master controllers comp. Okay. And then put them in the right place in the scripts folder in the Harmony file and save it. Okay, so now let's watch what happens when I scrub through. When I scrub through on my master controllers, I usually like to copy a pose and paste it somewhere else so it's just a testing place. I don't want to mess up my original poses. So I'm going to go here and I am going to scrub through. Now look at that. That's kind of weird, right? Like, we don't want the eye disappearing behind the head. But that's what happens when you set it to interpolate. All it has to use are the three things that you gave it, and then it's just tweening from. So the same thing is happening if you were to just separate your poses apart on your timeline and set motion keyframes. That's what's happening. So if you don't want that eyeball to be disappearing behind the head, what you need to do is you need to spread everything out and fix it yourself. So you'd go in, and what I like to do is I have a, let's see, I'm going to get rid of this master controller that I made. Oops, just press delete. Okay, so what I do is I have a front pose and then I have an almost front pose. What's the difference? I chose to make this arm now in front of the torso, and that's pretty much the only thing that I really nailed down there on my almost front. And then I think I switched to my front facing mouth, so we might talk about those later. And now that tweens perfectly with my quarter front view. And then I have an almost profile. I was turned on to that concept by Grizz and Norm on Instagram. They've got some really great stuff. But they have like this almost profile where, you know, you can still see both eyes, but it's not quite a perfect profile yet. So I will nail that one down so that my quarter front can tween perfectly with that almost profile. And then finally I get to the profile on the next one. Then when you make your master controller, you say, I want it, come here, I still have it open on the screen. I want it to go from frame 1 to frame 30. But this time I do not want it to interpolate. I just want it to use those 30 little notches that I have. And so that's a little bit of a better way to make your master controllers so that it'll give you what you want. While we're on the topic of master controllers, I'm going to show you how do you update a master controller. I hope that you are using something newer than Harmony 14, or whenever master controllers were first introduced, you kind of had to redo the entire thing yourself. But I know as with Harmony 17, I'm pretty sure we got this ability with the unroll wizard. So I'm clicking on my torso tilts, which can do a lot of stuff. I'm going to click on this unroll wizard and open it, and it brought out my grid, okay? So these are all of my poses that I have saved into my master controller. So if I click on them, you'll see what I'm doing here. So here's this upper tilt, and then the almost profile upper tilt, and then I've got the quarter up. And so these are just frames. They correspond, if you watch the little timeline marker here, as I click on them, you'll see the timeline marker jumping around at different points. Now, the trick is when you have something that's going to be a little messed up, if the eye is going to pop behind the head, or if the arm is going to come in front of the body at some mystery point, what is a little easier to do is you do put both of those as separate points, but you just put them really close together in your grid so that when you're dragging around your master controller, it gets past the messed up point as fast as it can. Now, I do want to show you a weird little glitch. I'm hoping this will get fixed sometime. So here, right now, this point is at x equals -9. And let's say that I wanted it to be out at like x equals -12. Let me show you a weird little thing that happens. I come in here and I start typing, like I would select that and type -12. It gave me -92. For some reason, it takes the numbers that you're typing in and it doesn't let you finish typing before it tries to guess what you're typing. So it thought, oh, I can't let you go past -9. You can't start it with a -1. So if you face this issue, one of my students showed me this. I'm very, very thankful. You can still get it to -12. You just use these little spinners and just click on it really, really fast. And once you get it out past -10, then I think I could probably type in the 2. Nope, I can't. So hopefully someday that will be fixed. But you can spread them out by using your little spinners. One other thing that I wanted to mention before we leave this concept of master controllers is how important it is to mark your poses. All right, so like I was showing you earlier, here's my front pose. I could right click, choose mark frame, and click on red. That's how I got all this stuff. If you wanted to get rid of all of these things, you could right click and choose mark frame and choose remove frame marker. But let me show you why we like to use these so much. So I'm going to reuse this front pose of the potato further down in the timeline to where I want to start doing some torso tilts. So now I have this front pose, and what if I end up needing to change something here? I want to remember, oh, that one's more up to date. I want to copy and then paste it to this main pose. So it just helps you so that you can remember where different things are located on your timeline, especially when you're starting to use master controllers, because you need to tell it to reference all these different points on the timeline. Okay, we can keep
So
moving.
We've got another question. So can Matt explain a little bit about the setup of new normal map system height map, like the little shark from last year?
Actually, I have not used those enough to get them ready. I've used them a little bit, but that has to do with colors and using your effects nodes for lighting. And there's some really great tutorials that you can access. Here, I'll point you in the right direction. So if you go to the, let's see here. If you go to the journeys, and if you go into the compositing, I'm pretty sure this is where you can find it. There's a rabbit that has some three-dimensional things on its ears and its face, and the documentation, you need to know about this if you don't. You just come up here inside the software help, online help, and unlike some other software, this is pretty well written. This is where I learned a lot of what I learned. But you could come in here and it will give you examples and how, there you go, there's the rabbit I was talking about. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful to you, but good question.
Yeah, just so that everybody knows. So again, we'll be sending out an email to everyone, and it seems that there's a lot of question about how or what learning possibilities are there. So for sure, as Matt mentioned, there's docs.toonboom.com, and that's where you can find documentation on all of our software. Or you can go to learn.toonboom.com, and that's our learn portal with the journeys Matt's been referring to. And those resources are all free. And what Matt actually helps us teach are courses like our cutout animation course. It's a 40-hour online course. We just opened up 5 sessions that will be running from November until May. There are over 30 courses per session with things like cutout, paperless, rigging, rigging 1, rigging 2, compositing, and so on. Those are paid courses, but then you get access to a teacher with a class of only about 10. So you really learn the ins and outs of rigging or master controllers or compositing or any of those things that you're looking at to learn about.
Yeah, and so thank you for bringing that up. This is something I definitely wanted to cover. It can be hard learning all of this on your own, no doubt about it. It's really helpful if you have somebody that you can ask questions to. Something I really enjoy about those sessions that I've had the privilege of teaching are that the class size is usually pretty small. Usually it's 6 max in the past when I've been teaching. And so you have an opportunity to ask a question if you get stuck while we're going through the processes, and it's usually a 3-hour session, so you get a nice big chunk of time together, and it costs some money, but I really do feel it's worth it if you're trying to learn it, because you go step by step instead of just trying to find random tutorials here and there and hoping that they all go together, because they usually don't. So yeah, let me jump back into the rig here. Something that a lot of people wonder about is how to handle a rig flip. So watch, I've got my potato. He can do this whole 360, and that's because what I did was I first posed out the whole 180, and then I copied those keyframes, and then I chose one of my pegs to flip it all horizontally. Now, there's a lot of different ways to signal how to do that, but I want to show you one of my favorite ways, okay? So on this side of the body, you could search through all of my nodes and try to find where is the mystery node where he actually flipped the rig. And what I like to do is I like to use the coordinate toolbar. I right click and I choose coordinate. And this has the XYZ values. This has all the stuff. If you were to click and center on selection and click on the little plus, it has all of these numbers, but I really, really don't like drop downs. I feel like I'm getting slowed down when I have to go digging. So I have this showing up here, and look at this. I went ahead and I made a backdrop here, and I said, hey, this is where the rig flip happens. So I left a note in here, and I also made a transformation limit. So these things are so cool. Sometimes you're wondering, how can I just animate on an X? Or how can I only say this peg can do the Y, the up and down movement of the body? The transformation limit is the way that you do it. And I'll show you here in Harmony 20. You just press enter in the node view and it brings up a little node library for you. Or if you're working on something older, you just come in here, type in transformation limit. I think that this was introduced in Harmony 17. I could be wrong. And then, so you just drag that in, and then you say, I don't want anything to affect the X values or the Y values or the Z values or the rotate or the skew. The only thing that I'm gonna let come through is the X stuff. And so check this out. It is kind of weird. You'd probably wanna leave a note for people, but right now, I put this peg so that the pivot is way in the crazy up here. Nobody wants to use a pivot that's up there. But the thing is, you can't skew it. You can't squash and stretch it. The only thing that that can do is X flip. And so that's how I like to handle some of my X flips in my rig. Here I've got the master peg where I could squash and stretch it and move it around, but then I go up one and I come to this little thing. So that goes to say, use backdrops to leave people notes. And also, like, here's my master controller notes. I just made this giant backdrop that says, these are the things that you put into the torso and legs master controllers, everything below that, or everything below this is what I use for the torso tilts. The legs aren't included. So fun little things you can do. All right, man, the time is just cruising. All right, I want to show you undoable selections. I want to jump into preferences, and if we have time, I'll come back to some of the other things that I wanted to show you, but I hope that you're just finding at least something that will help you. All right, I'm going to come over here to the Shark. This is another rig that I had the privilege of building for our online training courses. It was a lot of fun. So this is a 360 rig, and it has deformer mouths, and if you take the advanced rigging course from us, then you'll get to see all of that stuff in action. Now, in Harmony 20, this cool little preference was introduced that some people might not be a fan of, and let me show you why and how you can get around it. Let's say that I want to select the back arm, and I only have the profile view. One way I could do it is I could move the torso out of the way, go click on the back arm, and then press undo, and then move this out. So that's pretty handy. But it doesn't work if you're using the default preferences. Let me show you where that setting is. If you go to Edit Preferences, with Harmony 20 and 21, undoable selections is checked by default. And so you can go and select something and then you press undo and it actually deselects whatever you selected. So I would uncheck that if you're used to using that workflow. But some people may like having it function that way. A few other preferences that I have found some of my friends have wondered about. You can use default separate position for pegs. I would highly recommend this, and I'm going to show you what it does. I'll go ahead and leave it unchecked. This is the default, but I would highly recommend that you check it, and I'll show you why. Okay, I'm going to go, you get to see one of my old rigs. Okay, this is before I worked in a studio. This is me just doing my best. Okay, so here's my hand, and let's say that I wanted to move the hand. I'm going to look in the function view at the XYZ values, okay? Let's say that I wanted to use the function view and move it, and I wanted to do an easing curve. Now the XYZ, oh, what? I must have changed. That's not the example I want to show you. I thought that I got this working better. Usually you can't separately adjust these XYZ values if the properties, oh, I know why. I'm not using peg selection mode, that's why. Okay, now I'm in peg selection mode. I'm gonna press undo a bunch of times. I was on a drawing layer. It was adding keyframes to the drawing layer, which is not good most of the time. I'm gonna click on the hand and I will move it, and you'll see all of these curves, the XYZ, they're all intertwined. I can try just moving the X, but I won't get any of those little handlebars to adjust the easing curves. And most of the time I recommend not to do easing curves when you're in a character rig, but some people ask about them. So for this reason, and I will show you the peg. This is what my node view used to look like. You could tell I didn't know what I was doing. This right here, position 3D path, if I now click on separate and I try to move it, now I can move it independently. Come on, where is it? Sorry. Okay, now I can choose the function curves for the X, the Y, and the Z separately from each other instead of them all being bundled together. So when you're making cutout rigs for characters, you want to make sure that this preference is set to be default separate position for pegs. Now, what if you were like me and you made this character and it's kind of messed up and you want to fix it on all of the pegs after the fact? Also, when I made this character, I was allowing keyframes to be put on the drawing layers themselves instead of on the pegs. That's a big no-no. You want to keep the drawing layers just for drawing swaps, and then the pegs where you're keeping the keyframes. So let me show you how I would fix this if I had built a rig with this issue. If you wanted to do it one at a time, which you don't, you would click on the layer properties and you would go to advanced and you would, or sorry, controls, you would uncheck animate using animation tools. But as soon as you check that, the keyframes that used to be there cannot be removed. You'll press F7 and they won't go away. So, oh, wow, it is. That is very interesting. Used to not work that way in Harmony 20. Let me just show you how I would recommend getting rid of keyframes on all your drawing layers at once, especially if you want to keep your keyframes on the pegs. Here's how I would do it. I will go to my X sheet and I will shift select all of these nodes for this character. So in the X sheet, you only see drawing nodes most of the time, unless you have different display options. So I'm going to hold shift, select them all. Then I'll go back to my timeline and I'm going to go to this option down in the lower left. It's called selection only mode. And so now you're only seeing all the drawing layers. If you press Control F twice, you'll see all of these. And now you can easily shift select from the top of the first part of your timeline and then come down to the bottom right, hold shift, and then wipe out all of those keyframes by pressing F7. And now all of your layers should be cleaned off from having all of the keyframes on them. I hope it doesn't crash. That'd be a little bit of a bummer. How about we take a question while this is processing?
Yeah, so there was a question about how you handle head turns with the transformation switch.
Ask that one more time. Can you say that again?
It said, how do you handle a head turn with the transformation switch?
So the transformation switch, that thing gets created automatically for you if you click on a drawing layer and then you click on this little plus. That makes a group and a transformation switch, and it automatically starts putting in your drawing swap name and it hooks it up to the right transformation, the deformation chain. So if you're able to go back to the beginning of the panel, you'll see that. And so that's how I handle it. You just have different swaps for the front, the quarter, and the profile, and then you make different deformer chains for each of them. And then you can tween forward and backward, all that fun stuff that we were talking about earlier. I hope that helps.
So we have a little bit of we have one more question. It's a little bit of a longer one.
Okay.
Julien is joining us from France, so it's late.
Bienvenue.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, Julian. I often have designs with outlines that only appear in areas of the same color. I use cutter systems, but is there a less heavy trick? So is it possible that the end of the line is not cut straight but rounded?
That's really interesting. So what they're talking about is commonly known as self-traced lines. Let me come back to that. I'm going to finish this really quick and then we'll talk about that. All right, that's a very good question. Okay, so I've got my rig, and let's say that I needed to now go through, let me go back to not selection only mode, but normal view mode. Let's say that I wanted to make all the drawing layers so they could never accept the keyframes. Watch how easy it is. I'm going to hold Option or Alt, and I'm going to drag select across my group. Now, holding Alt means it's going to go and select everything inside the group. If you don't hold Alt, it'll just select the group itself. It might not affect everything inside. So I am going to come up here to my node view, set properties on many layers. It's three little green checkboxes. And check this out, I can say animate using animation tools off. Now, it would be really nice if there's a little tooltip here. This is only going to affect the drawing layers. Your pegs will still work just fine. So I have everything selected, all my deformers, pegs, effects, everything. The only thing this is going to change is I'm going to press OK, and from now on that hand layer, let me go in my other node view, that little check mark that animate using animation tools has been turned off. And while we're at it, let me show you another thing that I would often use this multi-check mark box for. I'm going to hold Alt, select everything, click on it, and I can say 3D path or separate mode. This is in reference to the pegs where all the XYZ stuff is bundled together, or you can have it separate. For character animators, they want it to be separate. So you would come click on here, separate mode, and that automatically goes through. That looks a little funky. What happens is everything goes back to one place. So it doesn't bring your keyframed poses out with it. So that's something you just have to be aware of. And if I were doing that, what I would do is if I wanted to get to do that change, I would export an image sequence of my whole timeline and then import those all in and use a transparency so I could still see the previous where I had everything. And then once you have undone the 3D path stuff, then just go pose it really quickly with your keyframes to match what you used to have. So little band-aid fix on that. I want to show you something that I'm very, very thankful that they adjusted in Harmony 21, that it had troubles in previous versions of Harmony. So here you can click on your tools toolbar. Now, this is the only toolbar you can't by default start customizing. You can customize all of your other toolbars pretty much in the program by right-clicking and choosing Customize. But the tools toolbar, you need to do something special for it. I'm going to pull open Harmony 20. As you can see here, I have no drop downs on it. If I go into my preferences, there's this option, it's called Flat Tool Toolbar, requires relaunch. So what it does is instead of having drop downs where you've got the cutter and the contour editor right together, it'll put everything just in a line, and then you can take out what you don't want and put in what you do. But I've had friends who've given up on it because it didn't work for them. So let me show you. Here's the Flat Tool Toolbar. There's nothing in any drop downs. I right click, but Customize is not showing up. So this was a little quirk in the older versions of Harmony. If you come up here to your main toolbar area, so not in the camera. So main toolbar area, right click and choose Customize. Oh, sorry, wrong. I need to come up here and click Tools. So now it's sitting up here. Now I can right click, now Customize shows up. Now I can go ahead and add in some more tools, apply, and then the other thing is people will get kind of confused. They'll try like dragging the toolbar. They're like, hey, why won't it dock in the camera? In order to get it to dock in a different view, you need to go to the view, right click, choose what toolbar you want, and then you can dock it there. But you can't drag the toolbars, the tools toolbars between views. Okay, Mouths, maybe we could talk about mouths. We're reaching the end of our time on this, but we have been answering some questions, so maybe I get a pass, right? Okay,
Yep,
so
totally.
okay, let me talk about mouths. Okay, so I'm going to show you 3 different mouth systems, and all of them can be helpful for their own reasons. First of all, I'm going to show you the simplest kind of mouth system. I'm going to show you the punk. All right, so the punk, if I click on the mouth and I go to the drawing substitution window, I hope that you love the drawing substitution window. I do, it's great, you can see everything. If I simply use my bracket keys, I can swap through all of these swaps that I've already drawn ahead of time. Now, one weakness to this system, well, first let's talk about strengths, right? This is really easy. You can do almost all of the lip sync with just like 4 shapes is just the main opening sequence. And then you get the ooh and then special mouths like L, E, F, that kind of stuff. But one weakness is if you try squashing and stretch it, the teeth and the tongue, they're all stuck together, so that's kind of annoying. All right, let me show you another system. Now, this system's pretty fast to make too, so that's another benefit. All right, let's go to the shark. Okay, the shark has some master controllers. I've just got to show this off real quick. The shark's mouths, I'm just going to select all the master controllers, click on show controls. Okay, and I did make a little reference down here. I can swap it on to show. Okay, great. So let me just make some more room so you can see what's happening. All right, so this is what you would call a deformer mouth setup, to where I've got deformers on the mouth and I can get any shape I want because there's these 2 shapes that are intersecting, and that's the only place that you're ever going to see the teeth coming through and the tongue and stuff. And then we make master controllers to where you can access any of that stuff really fast for any of the views. I can go to the quarter view and switch to the quarter mouths and then do all of that. I've got happy mouths, I've got sad mouths, I've got neutral mouths. So this is really dynamic. You can get anything you want, but it takes a little bit of setup time, and in order for you to get the lip sync, you kind of have to use these controllers. Sometimes it's not quite as easy as just using your brackets. So let me show you a system that I like to use a lot, and I consider it kind of a hybrid system where I'm going to mix some deformers and some swaps together. So I'll show this to you on my matte rig. So this is the little cartoon version of me. So what I have is, I'm going to go on my timeline to where I usually put the mouth stuff. All right, so when I'm building a file, I will use these frame markers, these scene markers. If you haven't seen these yet, they're very, very helpful. You can right click and choose scene marker, create scene marker, and you can say, hey, you can give it a name, and you can tell it to be up for a certain amount of time, and you can choose a color, and it can just help you with organizing your timeline so that you always remember, oh yeah, this is where I have all my mouths, and oh yeah, down here, this is where I show all the swaps for my hands. So very helpful to use those. But back to what we were saying. I have made all these sequences for the mouse. Just goes from closed, the O, to wide open, to the O, the ooh, and then any weird stuff that I need after that. So what I do is all of these are what are called synced layers. And if I click on the lips and I swap them, the teeth and the tongue will swap also, but the teeth and the tongue are just, oh, sorry, the tongue is not swapped, but the teeth are synced. Anyways, these tiny little black dots mean something is synced. And we don't have enough time to go into all of it, but you can check out the documentation if that sounds good to you. Let me show you how I handle these mouths. I'm going to show my deformers. I'm pretty much pressing this button with Control-Shift-D with my own shortcuts. And so what I've done is I have made it so that some of these mouths have deformers on them. The same way that we did multiple deformer chains for the face, it's just you click on your drawing swap, you click on the deformer tool, and then you click on that little plus. And so let me just give you an idea with that mouth, how many deformation chains I have. Okay, so I've got 18 deformation chains. and I've named them. There's the front number 1 mouth, front number 2 mouth, front 3. So that's kind of what I do. And the reason that I do the deformers on the closed mouth is so that I can get any shape that I want with the closed, and then I put one on this slightly open one so I can get some really nice tight shapes. And then I put one on the widest so that I can get really wide and have a lot of fun with it. And this system is probably my favorite way to go, because when I'm doing lip sync, I can still just use my brackets to get the majority of the lip sync to work, and then I can come back through and customize it if I need a little bit more. Also, because these are synced layers, they're separate, so I can move the teeth separate from the mouth. I do have lower teeth. Let me show you what I could do. I could move that mouth down, click on it, press undo, press undo. Oh no, that undo selection thing. I didn't want to have that. Yeah. So I want to be able to move it out of the way, go select those teeth, press undo, and bring them up. Or I've also made this little handle that I can click there and bring it up with the tongue. You use a little visibility node. Man, there's so many fun things to talk about. I wish we had more time. The last thing I wanted to talk about was notes and anti-aliasing errors, because I've seen people struggling with these. So let me get through those two things, and then we can take some more questions, okay? Anti-aliasing errors. I'm gonna take my display, hold Alt, plug it in under this arm. All right, let's take a look. These arms look great right now. Well, I think they look pretty good. But when I go to the render view, I'm gonna notice this tiny little annoying black line. Now, where's that coming from? This is coming from using the auto patch in the way that it wasn't really meant to be used. So let me show you. And I've seen plenty of people accidentally use this. So what's happening here is they have the regular upper arm. If I were to go to the drawing view, you'll see I've got the line art here, color art here, nothing on the underlay. I've got some crease stuff on the overlay, okay? So that's what's happening. So this cable, both of the cables right now are bringing all 4 of those sublayers with them. But I'm filtering out the auto patch. So if I press enter auto patch, it's just one of the nodes that you have that you can plug in. So what this does is it takes the color, which goes to the center of the lines, and then it minuses away however thick the line is. And so what people are doing is that they're saying, okay, I'm going to take that auto patch stuff and I'm going to cut away the arm, the forearm, but it leaves this weird little thing. There is a way. I'm going to show you the old way. This is the no way, okay? Don't do this because it gives Harmony a hard time. I'm going to go Control H to add a composite. And I'm going to slide it into here, holding Alt. And then this was the old way of doing it. You would drag a bunch more cables and try to like strengthen that. Oh, actually, I think I'm doing it in the wrong place. It used to be that you'd kind of do it down here. Yeah, and then it kind of goes away. It's still there. But this kills Harmony when you do this. So please don't use this. They actually released this feature. It's called increase opacity. You can slide this in, and what it does is kind of like if you're in Photoshop and you have kind of a semi-transparent layer, and then you duplicate it, duplicate it, duplicate it, duplicate it until it's like totally not transparent anymore. That's essentially what this is doing. And so you can use this increase opacity node, and then you could type in a number, and it's essentially doing that other system where we have the multiple cables, but Harmony is okay with us doing it this way and would have a hard time with the other way. So that is one thing. And the other thing to know is to get the arm to really work nicely and not have any of that stuff, you just need to use the auto patch the way that it was meant to be used. So what I'm doing here is the auto patch is just cutting the lines of the upper arm, but it's not cutting the entire arm, because that usually leaves that little ghost. It's just too fine that it's cutting, but it's revealing at the same place, and so you get that little anti-aliasing error. So this is, here, I'll go full screen for you. this is the better way to do the arms. And I know that you see that, you're like, whoa, node view, lots of blue spaghetti, that's a little scary. Don't worry, you take it one step at a time, and it actually starts to make a lot more sense than trying to figure it all out in the timeline. And I actually do have a tutorial on my Matt Watts Art YouTube channel that shows you how to build these kinds of arms. So it's a two-part thing, and you can get everything you need from that. One other thing that I want to show is it can be nice to leave notes. When you're working in a studio environment, especially a big studio, it's kind of hard to pass the torch to everybody. Like, you want to tell them all the cool things that you made your rig do. Wow, I don't know why he's doing that, but let's just talk about what's important here. My potato has a lot of features that I would like my animators to know about. And so what I like to do is I like to put a sketch layer out here in front of the rig. So I've got my master composite, I could disable it or enable it. And then I have this sketch layer to where I could do some draw overs really quick if I need the pose to be a little stronger and I just need some drawing stuff. Or I have a bunch of notes that I've left for people. Cheek swaps are available, and we'll cut the eye and mouth. Okay, cool. So I just need to go find, here's that cheek swap, and I can cut the mouth with it. Or here's the eye one. Cool. So if I didn't show that here on the timeline, people might not realize that that's what this magic little purple thing would do. Also, I did these flipped things. So the way that I built my potato is I built just a 180, and I didn't want to have to redo all that work on the other side. So I just like copied it all. And then I made it so that I could have a bunch of synced layers. And if I press my bracket key, look at how all of the spots, all of the coat, everything that's asymmetrical flips to the other side. The way that I'm doing that is I have two of everything created. So I've got, here's the potato tie up flip, and then I have the regular one. So as you can see, here's the flip stuff, here's the tie stuff. And if you click on any of these layers, you'll see that they are all synced together. So if I swap one of them, all of them will swap. And that can be a really helpful way, because now let's say that the handkerchief is always supposed to be on the left side of the body. So now if I were to select the body and flip it, now everything's on the wrong side. So I click on that, I swap, and now everything's on the correct side again. I know that that was too fast to make total sense, but just a little tip there. Here are some resources we have for you. And then we'll take some questions. All right, so I've got my little, you can take a screenshot of this. So here's how you can find me online. Instagram is where I like to stay alive. I sketch stuff, I put my newest stuff there. My website is more of my professional portfolio. It's where you can find interviews that I've done. YouTube, that's where you're going to find all of my Harmony tutorials and some of my short animations that I do. And then my downloads, Gumroad. Let me just show you that really fast. I just barely started this, and I think it'll be a nice way to be able to pass along some really cool resources. So I've got my potato rig. You can download it. It's a 360 rig. It has torso tilts and master controllers. I've put a few things. It's got all of these different views in it. It is free. You just type in 0, I want this, and you download it. And so that's something available for you, along with all these handouts. You will find these handouts here in the webinar. If you go to that little panel right there under handouts, you can click on these. But these are things that I've found very helpful in a studio environment. This is how I like to label my mouths. And so what I'll do is I have two different versions of this handout. There's one that's for the character designer and one that's for the rigging artist. The rigging artist can easily make the in-betweens from the 2 mouth to the 6 mouth, and I just want this number of mouths from my character designer. Similar thing with character turnarounds. Usually you just need this many poses, but I also have another sheet that has kind of like a 12-point rotation, the almost front and the front and all that fun stuff. So I'm hoping that these will be helpful to you. And I finally have a hand chart. And some of the cutout rigs that we'll make end up having a lot of hands, and they can get disorganized very easily if you're not taking the steps that you need to make sure that they're organized in a way. And so here's some suggestions. And just like the other sheet, this one's for the rigging artist. This one is for the character designer. It's a little bit more simple. It says, hey, just draw these 16. And then the other chart says, this is how you could fit a whole bunch of other weird hands into your system, and it still holds up with the organization. So let's stop there and allow people to ask questions. One thing I did not get to was organizing the Harmony file, getting rid of extra big stuff. If anybody mentions that they want to see it, I will show that, but let's just take other generic questions. I can show you how to make the Harmony file lose some weight.
So for sure there was a question on the potato rig versus the mat rig. Is the potato rig like a lot more complicated than the mat rig?
So my mat rig is a 180, and it took me 2 years. I started it like a long time ago and couldn't get around to doing it very fast. The potato rig I just made last month, and so it's all the latest stuff that I'm using in my rigs. And the only thing that's missing is it doesn't have teeth, doesn't have hair, doesn't have a jaw or shoulders. But other than that, it's pretty much all the latest and greatest of how I like to build a rig.
So do you ever use auto lip sync in Harmony?
I don't. I used to. When I used to work at like an online education company, we would have these slides that were like 2,400 frames long. Oh, bless your soul for watching something that long. They're just like standing there pointing up at the ceiling every once in a while. But it was easy to use the auto lip sync to kind of just get the mouth to open and close. But then as I've gotten used to it, especially if you have your bracket keys, I'm just scrubbing through the timeline, opening the mouth a little more, closing it, opening it, closing it. That's usually how I'm doing it. And you get a better result anyway. Sometimes when you do the auto lip sync detection, it doesn't always get it exactly how you need. You go back through and touch it up a little bit. And sometimes when you get a lot of practice, it ends up taking more time touching it up the way that you want it to be than if you just go straight through. One other note about lip sync that some people find interesting. Usually I will not do anything with the lip sync until the animation is done. So if the character's screaming or something, sure, I will go ahead and make the mouth wide open, but I won't do any of the up and down or sounds until all of the animation is done, the character's moving and performing the way they need to, and then the last step, the cherry on top, is doing some of that lip sync.
Okay, so I think we have one more question. We've done pretty well answering most of them, other than a bunch of comments of, oh my goodness, you like save people a ton of time. Everybody, I think there are people who are in love with you. There are people who'd like to interview you. I've asked them to reach out directly to you through your website. So I don't know if you have maybe a top 3 tips to optimize your rig or to think about so that it doesn't get too heavy.
Yes. Okay, let's do it. And this leads into the other thing I wanted to talk about that I said maybe we could do. All right, so in Harmony, yes, it can be really easy to make your rig too heavy. And some of the things that I've realized that I've learned, let me see, I'm just gonna press undo to the beginning of time. Okay, great, that should fix that little cowboy looking potato pose that I have there. All right, so one thing that you can be aware of is the more textures that you've imported, the more it's gonna lag. Also, the more effects. So like, let's say that your character designer designed something in Photoshop and they have the freckles and they're set to like a linear dodge kind of mode, and then they've got like a gradient and that's set to multiply, and then they have an overlay, and they have all of these modes. You can import each and every one of those layers and use blending nodes, sorry, the N. You can do that in Harmony, but it really makes it lag. So what I will do if I'm doing like heavy stuff with texture like that, I'll try to just like flatten it all in Photoshop and like release the clipping mask so it's bigger than the piece that it needs to be. Then you import it here into Harmony and you use your cutters and you do the inverted cutter, which is you double click it, it turns white instead of black. It'll only show on that piece. and then you can move that around. And then, like I was showing you earlier, I would normally like be locking those layers so that when I click on the layer, I'm going to select the piece that I can move. I don't want to be selecting the texture most of the time. Some other things that you can do to optimize your rig is don't use too many pass-through composites. Like, use what you need, but don't overuse them. Let me show you what I mean by that. Okay, here's a great example. All right, I am positive that some of my managers in the past would have wanted me to put some more composites under here. But the thing is the more that you have, the more Harmony can lag. And so I have gotten to the end of a rig. When I built the shark, I had all of these composites, and then I ended up just like deleting them because the rig was still lagging when I was trying to animate it. And so I would just delete them, and then as long as they're all going into something that's not too far away, cool. And let me just show you a quick little trick, I think you'll like it, of how to plug something in when it's really far away. So I'm just gonna delete this. All right, now that is way far away, okay? And let's say that you wanted the line art and the color art to be right next to each other, and you didn't realize that at first. Okay, you could drag that cable and scroll out and go way down there and, oh no, I don't remember where it's supposed to go. Let me show you my favorite way to do this. I'm going to select this, press Control H to add a composite. I'm going to hold Alt, I'm going to slide it into this cable, and then I am going to plug this into the composite and then delete the composite. Boom, they're both plugged in right next to each other down there, and I didn't have to zoom way far out and get tricky with my mouse. Okay, so those are a few suggestions. Now, let me show you the file organization, some stuff that you can do to optimize things. All right, I'm in Windows. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I have gotten really into optimizing my files. Okay, check this out. This says that the size of this file is 200 megabytes. It should not be 200 megabytes when you have a Harmony file. So let me show you some things that you can do to optimize this. All right, and that's, yeah, and you zip it, it would be a little bit smaller, but I'll show you a few things. Okay. Now, I have had people say that it's not worth doing this, but to me, I'm trying to save, file size, and sometimes it can be worth it. Not always is it worth it. All right, so I imported an animatic. No, that's not it. Okay, here's an animatic, all right? And if I were to go through this, I'm gonna add a display, Control Y, hold Alt to plug it in. Let's go display 2, let's enable it. Okay, so if I were to play this for you, this is an animation I hope to do someday. Okay, so here's my Matt. He's coming outside. It's a beautiful day, and he's gonna start sneezing a lot, all right? Because allergies get me. Okay, now there's not a lot of changes here. So when you import a video, ideally you're using Storyboard Pro, and when you export a Harmony file from that, it will be optimized and it won't do a separate image for every single frame. But if you're working with a client that gives you something from After Effects and it's a flattened video, let me show you what's happening in the background here. So I'm gonna go to my Elements folder. I've got a lot of stuff. What is this thing called? Matte Allergy. So I'm gonna come down here, and here we go. Let me see how much space this takes up. This takes up 118 megabytes, okay? So if I go into it, I will see a little preview of every drawing frame that is there, the TVG or the JPEG or however it comes in. So that's a lot of space. So this is how I like to sometimes go through and optimize. I will come here to the drawing substitution window and choose edit mode. This is really cool. I'm going to shift select from frame 2 to frame 12, and then I'll right click and choose delete selected drawings. Yeah, I really do. Okay, bye. And then I'm going to do the same thing, and I've set a shortcut for myself, Control Delete, and I am getting rid of all of those duplicate things as long as I can see it clearly here when there's a change. It can be pretty fast. And I will tell you, this is the biggest weight loss program that you can get for Toon Boom Harmony. All right, there. All right, but you kind of get the idea. And then you can come down here to your timeline, Control F twice, and then you can press F5 to extend the exposure. And then when you press save, your file will have lost quite a bit of weight. I'm going to show you another thing that people quite often forget to do. Okay. And then you'll want to press save when you're done with this. And I'm just going to delete all the rest of them just to show you how much weight that we're going to save here. Okay, so if I delete all those, and really there's only 5, get out of edit mode, press save. And now I'm going to go back to that element folder. Come on, Windows. Okay, check this out. Now there's only 5 frames in there, and they're each half a megabyte. So that used to take up a lot of space. Here's another thing that you want to check out. Go to your frames folder. What are all these weird Targa things? And if I shift select all of them, it's 5 megabytes. That's not too bad. I've seen a lot worse. But sometimes people will export their frames here, and that's what I do. I'll export like still frames or my video, but I always cut it out of here and go paste it somewhere else. I don't like it to live in my Harmony file. And let's talk about what these little things that are called previews are. Many people aren't aware, but sometimes when you're trying to render something and you can't see what it looks like in the camera, in the OpenGL view, here, let me just show you. Okay, so I've got my arm. Okay, let's say that I wanted to animate a blur right here, okay? So with this arm, I added a blur node, blur directional, but I'm not gonna see it until I do the render view, okay? So it's not showing up in the OpenGL. So if I really wanna see how it feels, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna click on this little render with effects, render and play. And some frames have already been rendered. Do you want to re-render them? Yes. All right, so it renders them all out, and then it brings this up so I can actually see what it's looking like. Okay, that's really helpful. But when you do that, it makes all of these little preview frames here, and it can take up quite a bit of space. And so what I do is I use it, and then I stop it, and then I come in here and delete all of those because they're not needed anymore. They were only needed when I previewed it the one time. And now when I go ahead and try to zip this thing, or yeah, zip that. I've got a shortcut I use for that. It is 24 megs instead of 200. That is the classic amount of weight loss that we get when we go through and make the animatic a little tighter and get rid of those extra files. So any other questions pop up? Because I have some more tips.
Matt, I think we're almost at our time. We've been on for an hour and a half already. but
That's fun.
to let everybody know, if there are any questions we haven't addressed, we will get back to everybody who has asked questions. Even if we've already responded to you, we will get back to you this week on a one-to-one and make sure that we answer those questions separately. You don't need to worry about the handouts or the links, or I forgot where they were. We will send you all those free resources, and we will also send you a copy of this recording through a link on YouTube, so you can go and check that out at any time. And just a big, big thank you again, Matt. You always give too much when you help us out with these seminars. Thank you to everyone who stayed on. We've still got 160 people on there, so thank you, thank you, thank you, everyone who showed up today. And please don't hesitate to visit Matt's website, YouTube, Instagram. Matt is giving tons of tips and tricks, and he's got the professional background to know that what he's suggesting really does work in the day-to-day at the office. So please be sure to follow Matt on all of his channels, and we will send you those as well so that you can stay connected and see all those free resources Matt has.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. Really appreciate you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, bye.